Hello there, everyone. Today we're going to start into Daniel chapter 7, and this video is more or less a summary or an introduction into the chapter, but we won't be getting into details here. But regardless, we're going to go through a summary. So if you have your Bibles, that'd be great, and have a prayer to the Lord, ask for understanding, and yeah, we'll get into it. So what we have here in Daniel 7 is an enlargement of Daniel 2, which we just went through in the last video. So Daniel 7, though, it's has some different aspects to it. So we're going to see what those are just briefly here. Daniel 7 starts off this time in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, and Daniel is given a dream. And this dream starts off with 4 winds striving upon the great sea, and as this happens, we see these different beasts arise one after another in Daniel 7. So we have 4 beasts. We have, starting in verse 4, you have a lion. Then verse 5, you have a bear. Verse 6, you have a leopard. Then verse 7 and 8, you have this other beast, which it does not mention any particular animal that this beast looked like, but it describes some other elements of this beast, mostly how terrible it is and the things that the beast does, but also how it has 10 horns and so on. So this 4th beast, we're going to be referring to it as the non-discript beast, because it doesn't describe specifically what this beast is. So that's basically the term that we'll be using for it throughout this video and in other videos as well. So we have those 4 beasts. The 4th beast actually has 2 phases. It has the phase where it just has 10 horns, that's verse 7, and then in verse 8, 3 of the horns are plucked up, and a great or a little horn, which is a horn head because it has a face on it, grows up in place of the 3. So there's 2 phases to the 4th beast, and then what we have, starting at verse 9, is a judgment scene. We see thrones set, there's the Ancient of Days who goes and sits on the throne, and then you have one like the Son of Man coming and standing before the Ancient of Days, and in verse 10 it mentions the judgment being set and the books opened, right? And then you end up seeing it describes the downfall of the 4 beasts, and it describes the kingdom being given unto the one like the Son of Man, and also to the saints. And that goes through the rest of Daniel 7. And in Daniel 7, the last half of it is primarily dealing with the saints and the one like unto the Son of Man receiving the kingdom, as well as giving some more aspects of what goes on with the 4th beast. So that's basically what we're going to be getting to in the videos that are following this one. I just want to touch on a few more things here just as kind of an introduction into the next videos. What we have starting at the beginning of the vision, as I mentioned before, we have these 4 winds striving upon the sea. So let's just cover that briefly. These 4 winds, verse 2, let's just read it. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. Okay, so what we saw there is that we have these 4 winds striving upon the sea, and as a result, these 4 great beasts came up, right? So let's look at the number 4 first of all. 4 is a number in Scripture which is commonly used to refer to things that are earthwide or global things. We have 4 points on the compass, and we have 4 seasons of the year, and I'm sure there's many more examples. You can check into that yourself, but essentially it represents things that are global. And of course then we have these 4 winds? What do winds symbolize? Well, in different contexts, winds, means different things. Paul talks about winds of doctrine. Christ said that those who are born of the Spirit are as the wind. Wind is used as a symbol of the Spirit. There's different applications of the wind for sure. So we have to look at the context. In this context, it says that the wind strove upon the great sea. So obviously it's causing some sort of strife, right? And as a result, these kingdoms, or these beasts, started arising. And, if you haven't looked at Daniel 7 at all before, you might be wondering why I said these kingdoms. Well, because these beasts represent kingdoms, which you can read in Daniel 7 itself, which hopefully you'll read the whole chapter on your own, since we won't be doing that in this video. Verse 17 and on, it describes pretty clearly that these beasts represent kingdoms, right? So these four winds strove upon the sea, and so some sort of strife, and then these kingdoms start arising. So what type of strife causes kingdoms to arise? Well, usually kingdoms arise by defeating other kingdoms, right? Taking over territory and destroying armies, and you know how it works. And so these, this type of strife is obviously military strife primarily, and of course naturally political strife would be involved. But regardless, we see strife happening, and the winds represent strife coming upon the sea. Now the sea, of course, is part of the symbolism. It's not just talking about the literal sea, since these beasts arise from the sea and the four winds strove upon the sea. So what does the sea represent? Well, we know from Revelation 17:15 that water represents people. The sea is a little bit more specific. We have places like Isaiah 57:20, which says that the wicked is like unto a tumultuous sea. And that's a paraphrase there, but you can check it out, Isaiah 57:20. So the sea represents, again, it has to do with people because it's water, but it's a little bit more specific than that. It has to do with mostly heathen people, right? Not Israel per se. But that's all part of what the sea represents. Now also, as we go into further videos, it will become more clear what the sea represents specifically in this context. But even as we go through the beasts here and get into Revelation a little bit more. But I'll just mention here, just on a logical note, for the sea, we know that a sea is a large gathering of water representing people, and we know that water comes from the seas and goes into rivers and so on and so forth. So in a sense, a sea is not only a gathering place of water, but an originating place, a place from which water goes. And so the originating place of peoples, right, on the earth is, certainly not Canada, where I'm from, or the United States, or any of these places. It's actually from what we call the Old World, right? So the sea is tied together with this concept of the Old World. And that's where we'll see all these different kingdoms arose from. They arose not here in, the Western world, but out east, the old country, the old world. So we'll see that more as the videos go on. But that's essentially, bringing us to the place of going into the first beast. But before we end this video off, I just want to mention a couple other things. You'll notice as we go through the beasts that the beasts are actually numbered. There's actually a couple different numbering systems. And the reason why, if you saw the first video that I did on Daniel here about interpretation and when Daniel's prophecies apply, we saw that it reached from the ancient world up into the present time and even future. So what we find is that Daniel's prophecies are actually covering the history of the world. So some of the things it doesn't cover specifically, but it covers inferentially. For example, we see in Daniel 7, the lion has 2 wings. Then the bear has 3 ribs in his mouth. And then the leopard has 4 wings. So you see 2, 3, 4, right? So that's a numbering system. Why is it that there's 2, 3, 4? And then, of course, you have another sort of numbering system with the lion being the greatest of the beasts, and then the bear being the second greatest of the beasts, and the leopard being the third greatest of the beasts, right? So you have, in one sense, the lion is the first, the bear the second, the leopard the third. And that's, the more obvious context in Daniel 7, since literally the first beast there was the lion. So you see that by nature of the beasts themselves, the lion is the first, the bear is the second, the leopard is the third, right? But you have this kind of unnatural numbering system as well going on, where you have a lion with 2 wings. Well, that's clearly unnatural. And then this beast, 3 ribs in its mouth, okay. And then leopard with 4 wings, as I mentioned. So what we have is it's showing you that in one sense, this first beast, this lion, is actually the second kingdom. It's not the first. And you'll see here on the chart that you have the antediluvian world, right? And then after that came the flood. So that's when we're looking at the kingdoms of the world throughout the whole history of the world from the very beginning. We can't leave out the antediluvian world because, by the time, the flood happened, I think it was, 1,600 years from creation, roughly, an estimate, when the flood happened. So you have over 1,500 years, and that's not going to be included for some reason. Well, it's not included specifically in Daniel 7 in a delineated sense, but it's obviously implied by the numbering system, because there had to be a first. If you have 2, 3, 4, it's kind of leaving you hanging for a reason, right? So you have before, and since you have the chart in front of you anyways, before Babylon, which if you saw the Daniel 2 video, you'll know how this ties in, right? You have Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Really simple. So you have first antediluvian world, that's the first actual kingdom, right? The first world empire was actually before the flood. Then after the flood, you have Babylon arising very quickly, right? Which we'll get into more in the actual video on Babylon, the lion. But you had Babylon rising quickly. It was the next kingdom, the second world empire. And then, of course, the bear representing Medo-Persia, corresponding with the chest and arms of the image of Daniel 2, right? And you have Greece, represented by the leopard, corresponding with the belly and so on of the image. And then you have Rome, of course, represented by the non-discript beast, paralleled in Daniel 2 by the legs of iron. And so, and you'll see here also on the chart, there's a number of other things that go beyond the scope of this Daniel 7 study, though these things will be discussed in this channel in upcoming videos. But just to quickly summarize the chart here, since we're on it. Okay, so you have, going all the way from the beginning, you have the antediluvian world, the flood, Babylon the lion, Medo-Persia, the bear, the leopard is Greece. Then you have the 2 phases, pagan and papal Rome, that's the nondescript beast. And then you have this leopard-like beast of Revelation 13, the first half of Revelation 13, which is also referred to as the composite beast, since it's made up of elements of all the beasts previous to it in Daniel 7. So Revelation 13 ties in very directly with Daniel 7. And then you have the next beast, the lamb-like beast, which is the second half of Revelation 13, which follows leopard-like beast here. Immediately to the right of that, you have the woman sitting on the heads. Now, before the woman sits on the heads, according to Revelation 17, the woman sits on many waters, which you see just below the bear on the chart there. And then, of course, after the woman sits on the heads, she rides the beast in Revelation 17, which, of course, is followed by the millennium, and it gets into some more details which are, again, beyond the scope of this study. But anyways, you can see here that this is, without gaps, going over the whole history of the world from beginning to end, and it describes the restoration. We have 7 beasts, from the lion to the scarlet-colored beast, and we have 7 universal systems, again from the lion to the scarlet-colored beast, although there are a few differences there between the 7 beasts and the 7 universal systems. And we also have 7 kings, which you see there beside the image of Daniel 2. So again, we're just summarizing that. If you want to study this chart in more depth, you can go to the-branch.org and once you go there, you'll see different authors, different writers listed at the top, and you can click Victor Houteff and go to Shepherd's Rod Volume 2, and in there you'll see on the table of contents where it goes through all these different beasts, and this chart is actually originally from that book. Or on the website, you can go to, on the left-hand side, the Publications tab, and from there you can find Victor Houteff and Shepherd's Rod Volume 2. So anyways, that will give you some reading material if you want to look a little bit more in depth into that. But that should summarize the chart here. And yeah, so that basically sums up our introduction here. And look for the soon coming video on Babylon the Lion. Shalom.